infrastructure industry. We have our, from the digital IT media, IT space. So these are the key leaders in the city who are actually shaping Rajasthan and have their businesses globally. So I guess why it's important for me to even let you know about the Thai global scenario. And as you know that Mahavir represents on the Thai global platform as a president. And Alok, with you being on so many different forums, with the IXDA and the Cumulus and at the, at the Montreal Design Declaration, and how you've been trying to take design to different parts of the world, trying to look at how design could make a difference to all the businesses around. So it would be very interesting that your perspective as a design thinker, as a design, educator, as a media person from the advertising industry. So how businesses have actually in the past, the whole consumption cycle, and in terms of really rethinking and remaking for infrastructures for 2040. So I think the conversation we have all the fertile minds here to actually connect and talk about these areas. So let's go ahead, and I think we were already on the right pace.
Thank Archana and thank Mahavi. What I would love, and thanks for being all in this conversation, is in this hour, if we can interconnect entrepreneurship, where you all are experts, with what I call design leadership. Because if in each chapter of Thai, we could have some design leadership, and I'm not talking about the simplistic design thinking recipe. I'm talking about design leadership being part of Thai. It would be a fantastic achievement, at least in our thinking and in our conversations. And then you can spread that within all the Thai circles. But maybe Thai Rajasthan could be the place where we are pushing the boundaries of entrepreneurship, looking at new models of creating stuff infused with design leadership approaches, which combine technological expertise with some others. And that is a conversation which is lacking in so many places. That would be my first take into this setting here.
Sure. So just for the information of everyone, if everyone can put their microphones on mute, and this is going to be very interactive. I'm just moderating the session. I'll probably ask the most questions if possible, but anyone can raise their hand, and I can see whoever has raised the hands, and I will reach out to you to ask a question. It's absolutely interactive. I will go in the order that the hands are raised on the Zoom. Please put everyone put your microphones on mute until your turn comes to speak. So Alok, just starting off straight away, what exactly do you mean by design leadership? I mean, I just need an elaborate definition from a layman's point of view. I mean, we understand creativity, we understand designing. What do you mean by design leadership? Is it foresightedness? Is it planning? Is it execution? Is it just the creative side of it? What, according to you, is design leadership?
My take on design leadership would be a synthetic one. It's a combination of all the elements you have mentioned and the ability to navigate between all these dimensions. The best example we have, or we had on the planet, was a guy like Steve Jobs. He had the ability to jump from creative thinking to his obsession of making the stuff exist, and another obsession which we don't see enough, which is the quality of the rendering of what we are proposing. Be it a product or service, we need to make sure that we raise the bar in terms of proposing something which is better than what our customers are expecting. And design leadership is the ability to envision that raising the bar and coming with solutions, propositions, which pushes the boundaries. That would be my take. The challenge with that definition or that description is that it requires the accumulation of so many types of expertise and the ability to navigate into multidisciplinarity, that we need to groom that. And companies who have that are the ones where you have not mono-thinkers, but multi-thinkers. And India is a fantastic country if you look back on the planet, because so much of you people, you have the ability to have done so many stuff. Look at, I'll give you a fact. If you look at the profile of 80% of designers, they have an engineering background and a business background, and they move into leadership in design. If I go into other countries, you don't have that. So that's an edge, and that is where I am talking about design leadership.
Okay, so how important, so so what we have been able to understand as entrepreneurs, and we're all in different fields and varied fields, we've been told and we've been practicing that never lose your core competence. So let's say my core competence is, engineering or creating software. How much percentage do you think is design involved into improving that core competence? So whatever that company is, like Arshana runs a design school. I mean, her core competence is probably education, but how important is it for her to bring in design and creativity? Is there a percentage that's defined, or it varies from business to business?
It varies, I would argue, but rather than looking at percentage, I would look at what I call transversal and vertical approaches. Any entrepreneur has developed a transversal set of expertise and is able to delegate. And then there is a core competence of design excellence in terms of conceiving and proposing, which needs to be there from the head, the CEO, the entrepreneur, and diffuse towards all the people in the system. So I'll use a Japanese proverb. There is a fantastic Japanese proverb which says, "A fish gets rotten by their head." So if you take the metaphor of the fish, you know that if something stinks in the head, the fish is going to be bad. I use that metaphor for companies and organizations. If the leadership, be it business leadership, design leadership, technological leadership, they are not strong enough, that companies gonna get rotten. Maybe not tomorrow, day after tomorrow. Sure. And I use that as a metaphor to provoke ourselves.
And is there a way for an entrepreneur to improve his design thinking and leadership, or is it inherent in someone and one has to discover that or improvise? Is there a process involved, or is to look within yourselves or to learn from people like you or others? Is there something that's required to be done?
So you are raising the question of the chicken and the egg, huh? We can take the example of Microsoft with the current CEO. You must have seen his book or heard about his book.
Yeah.
He went so much intro, bringing back his own life experience. But he went also outro, bringing external expertise. And so to try to answer your question is, the magic of entrepreneurship and the magic of design is the ability to be balancing between in and out, in and out, in and out. Zoom in, zoom out, zoom in, zoom out. And good entrepreneurs are, for me, good designers, de facto. Because what is design? Design is the ability to envision things which don't exist and help shape them. What is entrepreneur? Is the ability to build things which don't exist and shape them. The lens of the entrepreneur is organizational. The lens of the designer can be an object, can be a system, can be a service, can be something. If you combine both lenses, we are talking of the same stuff, but we are using sometimes the different words, or we are scoping differently. Now, if we put the entrepreneur lens, which is business organizational one, with the designer lens, which for the 100 years was more product and object, and we try to break the boundaries, because boundaries are in the head. We try to break those boundaries and we think about who do we want to make happy? Customers, consumers, human beings, ecosystems, planet. How can entrepreneurs break some of these boundaries and be in dialogue. One of the core answers which comes through 25 to 30 years of experience is the importance of multidisciplinary teams. And multidisciplinarity allows to have those interconnections taking place. So a good entrepreneur is the one who's able to balance multiple discipline and multiple viewpoints and create the negotiation and make the decision. Good designers are doing the same process. So I don't know if it helps to
No, it
push the
does help.
conversation.
What you're trying to tell me, and I'll tell you a challenge that we face as entrepreneurs, and especially younger entrepreneurs who are up on the way up in their life cycle, trying to grow. They become so involved with their business and the core work, they forget to distance themselves. They forget to have lateral view of their business. They forget to have, don't apply lateral thinking. They don't think of philosophy. They're thinking of surviving. You know, so sometimes an inherent competence or an external advisor or an external opinion is needed. And sometimes we or entrepreneurs don't know that when is that needed. The timing is the key here, I feel. Have you envisioned something like that? And is there some sort of a benchmark where you feel that you're stagnant, not growing, or not growing in the right direction, or your employees and you are not happy? Whatever. How is it that an entrepreneur should realize that he needs to evolve, or look at it from a distance, or look at it laterally, or look at it from a different point of view and not waste his or her energies into something that's not productive enough? Is there like a methodology there, or no?
I would say no, except that there is a radar. What do I mean by a radar? It's a set of tools that you as an entrepreneur, you have built based on experience, based on what you have been through. And the ability of a good entrepreneur, to my point of view, is to design a radar which says, now I have to change this, now I have to move into this, and so forth. Now, what I'm aiming towards is that a radar is based on experience, but also on frustration. Why are you an entrepreneur? Because you have been frustrated on some stuff, and you decided that you as an entrepreneur, you can do the stuff differently, shape the stuff, and you have tested and tried for 100 times, and finally you have succeeded. The 99 times you have failed, they have helped you build your radar. Designers go through the same journey. But what is happening is that we are not explicit enough and we don't share enough those stories. And the second point, and that is what you have been raising, time is critical. When do we know that it is time to change the direction? When do we know that it is time to call someone? When do we know that it is time to stop? That is essentially based on accumulated implicit experience. Why do we have these kind of conversations? Maybe to make some stuff explicit. And if I look at the history of entrepreneurship these last 50 years, and if I look at the history of design, what I see is more places of explicit conversations which allow people to be incited, which allow people to get insights and try not to do the same mistake. But now let's go to COVID. You said we won't talk about COVID, but COVID is an interesting provocation for all of us.
Yes, sure it is, yeah.
Because so many people are expert in the rooms, but so many people are voiceless. And that is where a conversation with Archana came, and we said, maybe we should involve you. How do we design systems and infrastructures for 2040 in order to avoid the COVID case we are living through in 2020? That is a complex question, but where we need to build capabilities. Yeah. And the young entrepreneur in the room are the one who will be leading the systems in 2040, because we will be out of the picture anyway.
Yeah,
but
sure.
Some of our decisions today might result in some impacts in 2040.
So can you give 4 or 5 examples?
How do we negotiate that?
No, what are the key elements that we need to work on today to achieve what you are saying, in 2040? Are there some immediate steps that we can take in the next 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, or are there too many, or there, some important steps?
From my point of view, there are some important ones.
Mm-hmm.
And the signals are, I was mentioning to Archana, like traffic jam in a city. That's a systemic problem. How do we resolve that? Imagine a city like, I don't know the state of Jaipur nowadays, but I guess there are quite a number of traffic jams.
Yeah.
A city like Bangalore, a city like Mumbai. Imagine that the center of Jaipur becomes without car. That is a design decision, both from the policymaker, both from entrepreneur like you all. You decide that the inner Jaipur will be without car. What are the capabilities we'll need to build? People will need to move from A to B. Will they have public transportation which is free or not free? A country like Luxembourg has decided to provide free transportation. That's a design decision because it allows people to move from A to B and do their business. So policymaker is enabling business and entrepreneur to flourish. And in 2040, we need to take some decisions nowadays which allow the combination of some meta problems and micro problems. But the inner objective of you entrepreneur is to be able to make entrepreneurship the core decision, the core activity of policymakers is to enable entrepreneurs to make their entrepreneurial activities. And so these are the kind of conversations that needs to take place today.
True. I totally agree with you, and most of them have to do with masses at large, with town planning, with public utilities and services, and also environment and energy, in my opinion. Though a lot is being done when it comes to energy, but I think countries like India have a huge challenge when it comes to public masses and public services. And I think it's not just a design, but it's a political decision also to a certain extent. But I quite agree, and I see where you're heading with 2040. I mean, going to the world where we are now moving into a virtual world as we speak. I think design on the template of on the phone, from UI to UX to web to virtuality to electric vehicles to the design of the car from inside to outside. Multiple things will change as we go. Transportation, between cities or countries, and it's a lot of disruption that's about to happen. In terms of whatever disruption happens, how important is it? I mean, of course, I can understand long-term meta, where it has to be energy efficient, it has to be slick and good looking. In terms of immediate look and feel, is design of more importance or critical nature, or is it just the consequence of what is being generated that is more important? For example, public service or public transport being free, well, that's okay, and that can happen, but does it need to be having a nice small bus with electrical? Does it need to have other stuff also? Does it need to be air conditioned or not air conditioned? I mean, so many other elements play a role, and then cost becomes a element into it, and then chicken and egg comes into the being, whether investment now for the future or investment in steps. What is the stepwise process that we need to do, and how important is the design in the virtual or technology world, according to you?
So today what is happening is an interesting questioning for the so-called virtual. I began to design website in 95. And in 99, 2000, I was busy with augmented reality installations. And I launched a company. And what happened is in 2004, we had Facebook coming in and social media coming in. So what I'm trying to connect here and to address your question is that as entrepreneur in technology, we underestimate the social desire of people. People are ready to have lousy stuff as long as they can talk and interact with each other. So what I'm telling is the human being is a social animal, and any activity, entrepreneurial activity, which is pushing the ability of that social animal to interact works better than an activity which is pushing the technological dimensions more than anything else. And this is a complex question where we need to rethink, because there are dimensions connected to that which are ethical. In UX and UI, many conversations we are having nowadays is it ethical or not? What do we mean by that? Compared to traditional design, where we design stuff, in UX, what we are busy designing platforms. We are busy designing places where people can get their autonomy of doing stuff. And that is a complex area where we need to reflect and come with solutions and prototypes which are specific to cultural dimensions. What is the success of, and why is India so successful in terms of conversation platform? It's with WhatsApp. You know that the worldwide WhatsApp success is due to India. Because in India, people took that platform and pushed the behaviors, and WhatsApp became a model of interacting which is different. Now, if you look at WhatsApp conversations compared to Skype, Skype nearly disappeared because of WhatsApp. So are there any design decisions there? Are there any entrepreneurial decisions, or is it consumer appropriation? So that is the question I would like to put back in the conversation here when we are talking about UX, UI, and appropriation of technologies.
My challenge here and my question to you that comes from this WhatsApp example is, I think it's not just the product or the service that needs designing or has to continually be designed. I think the targets is also moving. The audience is moving. Audiences, attention span has reduced way much. We're moving from Facebook to Insta to something else. We will soon enough WhatsApp will disappear, and it's because we as people have become so demanding in terms of services, in terms of look and feel, in terms of prejudices and politics and herd mentality, that it's so difficult to keep pace with all of that. And we as businesses, whether we're into jewelry, hospitality, mining, any business, handicrafts and technology, you will see that we are continuously changing our concepts and designs. We're continually changing the experience. We're continually changing. How does one keep pace with all that? One has to be constantly growing and growing, from where Apple had the lead to Samsung, Xiaomi catching up, or passing at some points, is a very, very dynamic or a critical thing. The world is going to churn a lot, and that is going to create a lot of turbulence, and design will have a very important role to play.
Yeah, and coming back to our 2040 question, how can entrepreneur envision what is happening in 2040? It's complex and not complex. It's not complex if we see how slow are big systems in terms of change and transformation. But it is complex because new technologies are changing the speed of stuff happening. So I'm professor in a hospitality culinary school, and we are looking at the future of hotels. We are looking at the future of food systems. We are looking at how people are behaving or want to behave. And so as designers, we are coming with some scenarios. What is a hotel? Knowing that today we had Airbnb. That was the question we had 3, 4, 5 years ago. The question we are having last week is, what is a hotel knowing that there is COVID? 90% of the room are empty. What is happening in some cases last week is that a hotel now has become a place where quarantine people can stay for 15 days. That has become the destination of a hotel. And that is for me an interesting design question. Is a hotel like a co-working space for work, a hotel for sleeping and whatever, how can we make sure that the stuff we are designing are dynamic enough so that their function can change related to context? And that is for me one of the example I'm exploring for 2040. The best example is a hospital. You are designing a hospital with high-tech technology in 2020, but you know that the hospital will need to serve other types of technologies in the surgical unit room in 2030. Make sure that when you are designing the hospital, you can unplug and replug many functional aspects, be it hardware, software, and so forth, so that the hospital remains at the edge of what it is. That is for me both a designerly question, a policymaking question, and an entrepreneurship question. And how can we infuse that thinking into other places?
And nature's role in hospitality, or nature's role in jewelry. I mean, we're going from natural diamonds to man-made diamonds, and equally good. I mean, jewelry is transforming. I mean, designing is changing. Things are becoming lighter, cheaper. Investment is no longer an option when it comes to things like jewelry, painting. You know, what are we moving away from nature, or is it cyclic in nature, or we go away and come back to it? How does environment roll into, get into all of this, or there is no role and it changes from generation to generation?
Some dimensions are cyclical.
Mm-hmm.
Some dimensions are changing depending on context. So I'll focus on your example of a sector which is jewelry.
Mm-hmm.
Who would have imagined that the Apple Watch would get the traction and the interest of companies like LVMH and others, so that a technology loaded piece becomes a luxury piece, which is pushing back the boundaries of what is perceived as jewelry. So you as entrepreneur, you have defined one space which you call jewelry, and a technologist came in and designed something which is part now of the jewelry ecosystem. Is that this is not cyclical. This is expanding the boundaries. On the other side, and I'm going back to the hospitality sector, what we see as trends in the hospitality and the hotel of the future is people, they hate being in the same room everywhere on the planet. And we saw the emergence of boutique hotel. Now what we see is people, when they go in a hotel, not for business, but for leisure, they want to go back close to the nature. And we have now hotels in parks, in natural parks. That is becoming a trend. So what I'm aiming towards is that the landscape is so fragmented nowadays because people have got access to so many information that as entrepreneur, we cannot anymore come with one model. We need to create dynamic model and see how being adaptive is possible. And that's a complex question because we are back to that chicken and egg metaphor. What is interesting with design, mm-hmm, and what is happening with you entrepreneurs doing is what I call the mindset of the prototype. In design schools, we are trained, and in engineering schools, depending on which part of the planet, we are trained to prototype stuff. The ability to prototype is, for me, one of the essential attributes of design. the entrepreneur does prototyping activities in an implicit way. In many places, not in an explicit way. And the sweet spot we can explore here is how entrepreneurs and designers can co-design prototype of systems and objects and services, which allows to try to get answer to some complex question. And prototyping is something we don't do enough in our systems, at least here in Europe, also in India, I'm sure, for one reason, because doing prototype requires time, requires some resources, and requires some safe space. The pressure of the market is so strong that we don't have the space to prototype. So how can organizations like TIE and others create this culture of prototyping is for me an interesting question to explore. I don't know what would be your take on that one.
No, I think prototyping, crowd, working together collectively, I feel as groups is very important. I think sometimes monetary reasons, some companies are bootstrapped, some are struggling on funding, some don't have the vision or the focus. I think collective working and organizations like TIE or smaller groups within that, mentor and mentee relationships at times, does, I think, kind of help in all that. But again, it's very subjective. For some people it might work, some people it might not work. But talking about chicken and egg situation, some companies are struggling to survive, they're hungry and they need money to survive and grow. Design has a cost to it. Even though the CEO might have the vision or the whatever, is there like a concept of intelligent designing where it's cost effective, it's not as expensive? Is money always important for a prototype or for a designing input, or it's not required, in your opinion?
My quick reaction would be the labeling. We have two approaches. Is design a cost or is design an investment? The challenge with the last 30, 40, 50 years is design has been seen as a cost, and design has been coming too late into the process and has become the lipstick on. But design has changed nowadays. Design is more about intent, intention, strategy, and investment. And we need to educate business experts about the DNA of design nowadays. And that's in one of my conversations, I was telling, we need to quit the industrial mindset. In the industrial mindset, we think that we design one stuff and we scale up and we have a model and we reproduce. But nowadays, even with UX, UI, and all our activities, the design mindset is different. And if we talk about food systems, about taste, about culinary taste, and is it going to change or not? I would argue yes and no. There are some people who will always like to have some stuff because it's, the body is, let's take the body as an example, and eating. Everybody eats. That will never change. What we have seen that everybody, when eating, they need stuff they are used to, and they need stuff which are changing. There is this bizarre tension. I'll give you an example. I'm coming originally from India. My parents were in Kolkata. If I don't have my dal bhat 2-3 times a week, I'm getting nervous. When I'm traveling a lot and I don't have my bowl of rice and my dal, I'm missing that. So my culinary taste requires my dal bhat. But if I have my dal bhat every day, I'm getting bored. So every 2-3 days, I need to change. So I'm using that as an example and as a metaphor of many things which are happening in our systems. We have some habits and we have some fatigue. How are we going to play with that and push the experience knowing that we need to have some habits and we need to have some fatigue that we need to replace. And that is where the magic of entrepreneurship and design can come in.
So talking about, yeah, I understand. So talking about the food industry, and that puts me a straight question to you. The taste is the design, or the packaging is the design, or marketing and branding that goes along with it is the design, or all three need design?
I would add a fourth one.
Yeah, they could be multiple. Yeah, yeah. Smell, of course.
know,
so everything is equally important in your opinion?
No.
Okay.
It depends.
Okay.
It depends.
So let's say in the food industry,
So in
your dal bhat taste does not matter so long as it's dal bhat, or taste is also, your mother's dal bhat would be better than the dal bhat that you will get in Brussels?
Oh, my mother's one is definitely better.
So the taste is important, right? And the brand recognition.
And the emotion. Emotion.
Okay. So that comes through marketing.
Partly through marketing, partly through experience.
Okay.
So I would like to oppose marketing and design. In many companies, you have a chief marketing officer and you don't have a chief design officer. And I think that in all companies, we need to have a chief design officer and a chief marketing officer. Now, what is the role of the chief marketing officer? Is to sense the market, the marketability. What is the role of the chief design officer? Is to bring back the human sense and not only the market sense. Because marketing is doing aggregation and human design is looking at weak signals. If we can combine those, we have interesting stuff coming there. So if I go back to India and I look at my travel experience, the most interesting travel experience was Vistara. Why Vistara compared to some others? Because they were able to make the coexistence of both marketing and human dimensions better than some others. How can Air India become better? That would be for me an interesting design question. Is it only marketing push only? I don't think so. We need to design or redesign some stuff. And that is where the conversation becomes interesting. We have been too much for the last 50, 60 years brainwashed by marketing that we need to rebalance. By the way, my first experience, my first job was at Procter & Gamble.
I was going to ask you about advertisement, marketing, and branding, but
I'm coming from that world, and I quit that world and I went into design because I was so fed up with simplistic marketing, brainwashing tools. You can market, you can throw all your money into marketing, but if your product is badly designed, you are wasting your money. So it's better to take some part of your money from marketing and spend that into design and design stuff which are creating over expectation solution. Then you don't spend anything in marketing. And that is why we need a mind shift.
So how much of a researcher do you need to be to analyze where your market lies, where the growth is, where is the stickiness to your product, and what amount of design, what audience are you catering to? Is there a lot of research that we as companies should be spending in before we start to think on designing or what works for our product or service, or research is not important and Google search is as good as a research?
Oh, I would argue research is so fundamental.
It's fundamental.
And we need that. I'll give you another example, a movie. What is a good movie? A good movie is a good movie if there has been a good script. If the scenario is bad, and if you do whatever in terms of casting and direction and everything, but the scenario is bad, at the end of the line, the movie will not be a good movie. So as entrepreneur, what is research? Is the ability to craft a good scenario. And to craft a good scenario, you need researchers and designers who are shaping the stuff. What is the challenge, and especially in our digital worlds? is that the shaping of stuff is changing every day, because you have your smartphone. The product you have in your pocket, the smartphone, is a container. Within that container, you have software services. And every 2, 3, 4 days, things are changing. And the expectation is changing and whatever. And that is where it becomes complex. How do we shape that? And I'll connect that to a question we need to, I was telling, we need research. We need CEOs and entrepreneurs to give enough money to research teams. That is where a company will make a difference. And we need to educate everyone about design in the company. Because I was telling, there is diffuse design, transversal, and there is vertical design. If we go back in the conversation about quality 30, 40 years ago, is quality a competence of only one division, or is quality required by all the employees in a company in terms of leveraging and producing some stuff? Quality should be the concern of everyone.
Sure.
Design should be the concern of everyone, but shaping this design should be the concern of some people. And again, we are back to that Apple example with Steve Jobs and Johnny and Ive. These two people made the team of shaping the stuff, but everyone at Apple is obsessed by the quality of what they are designing.
Sure.
Be it the engineer, be it the marketer, whatever. Where is the next Apple? Is it coming from India? Why not?
Yep.
That is my provocation to all of you. How can we have the next Apple of any category coming out of India? And I think India has all the ingredients.
Yeah, sure. So I think there is, I think we also have, there's another question that comes into play, and that's called legacy. It takes at least a decade or half a generation at least for perceptions across the world to change. India's perception has changed dramatically over the last 3 or 4 decades, as you're aware, in the minds of the US, in the minds of the West, rather. And it is now changing very rapidly in terms of design, products, services. And I think we should harness on that. I think we still need to work a lot and change that. And some things do need to come out of India to change that perception and legacy to come out of it. How important do you think is to get away from the shackles of your, like a 50-year-old company, a 40-year-old company known for X, Y, Z, now suddenly starting to make something else, a new product? How important is, or how difficult is it rather, for the buyers or perceiving people to think that that General Motors can do something that's very slick rather than create something that's old-fashioned or old design? Is there room for there, or is it better to start anew and start a new brand totally?
That's a complex question. I would say that it depends, but that doesn't solve the how. So companies, let's look at India and Tata. They can launch any new venture. What is the Tata magic? Is the trust they have built with so many categories throughout.
That's legacy, but that's legacy, and they're cashing on in their legacy. But what if you have to go contrary to the legacy of what perception people might have? For example, let's see, if India is not known for some technology and India were to evolve, would the world take it seriously, or would the world not take it seriously?
Today, I think they would take seriously.
Today, yes. And India is a bad example. As I said, India has been taken seriously and it's evolved. But many countries across the world that are not as, look, say Afghanistan comes up with something new. People will not, kind of take that seriously because it's Afghanistan, and it will probably die a very nascent death. So I think legacy does play a role, but I think there are ways to get out of it. Heritage, culture, environment are critical elements that India has, and tourism in India has been stagnant, unlike Europe. And I would like to focus, how can Indian tourism experience be designed differently from how, simple things in Paris or Spain or Italy or London have evolved into a much larger number of people coming in with infrastructure in place in India, with travel and everything rightly placed, with hotels in place. What is lacking in the tourism experience that you see compared to the Western world, where we can increase footfalls into India? What is the design element change? And I don't want marketing or sales into it. There is some experiential lack, I feel, other than getting rid of cars in central Jaipur. Architecture, heritage, performing arts, visual arts. India, has abundance of all that, but we've not cashed on it. What is the reason, you think, and what are the changes?
One of the reason is lack of education of the everyday tourism service provider.
Mm-hmm.
They have a lack of providing quality. The attitude chalta hai.
That's legacy. That's India's. That's what I'm talking about. India's branded with that. Anyone says, I want 100 pieces of jewelry, I'll deliver it. I need in 15 days. Oh, I'll give you in 14 days. We over-promise and under-deliver.
Yeah.
That's legacies. How do we change that? So out of 100 people in the tourism industry, there are 10 or 15 who are remarkably good, who are meticulous and organized, who are well versed with what is needed. But it's just this perception that's difficult to get rid of. Is there a huge design? Same is the case with Air India, I think, now. It's a challenge, but we need to start somewhere. 2-3 important steps.
So one area where we could start is education.
Sure.
How many hospitality schools we have where we push the boundaries and the levels of excellence? The challenge of tourism and hospitality is the desire for excellence. And that is lacking, as you said, for 85% of the people who are in the hotel and tourism industry. And we need to work on education. And another one, and that is what we see with COVID, is that if policy making is enforcing some bars of quality will come in. We don't see that enough.
Sure.
So we need to have more dialogue with policymakers, and and I hope we need to see policymakers also changing attitude versus systems. Policymakers are there to help the systems grow and not to impose rules. Mm-hmm. So what I was telling in one of my workshops is that companies, as well as policymakers, as governments, when they launch call for bids, it needs to be co-designed with designers, having done some research.
Sure.
That would help to make the systems better. So, complex question, and that is why it's fascinating and talk about that.
And I'm a firm believer of anything that's good for the benefit of the society, for it to be sustainable. So even if the tourism sector needs education, it should pay for itself in terms of education, and it should come out of the tourism sector and not the policymaker or the government to it. And it's a very difficult situation at times. And going back to how much money is needed to design elements or bring about change, is money becomes an important element. And a chicken and egg story, before people start to see benefits, money needs to be invested and time needs to be invested. And that becomes a challenge. And that's where prototypes or pilots are important for it to be run. We're ending, almost nearing the 1 hour of our conversation, and I have a question here. I just feel that design has an important role, and I agree with you. But I think it should be inbuilt in the cost or as an investment rather than an operational cost. It should be capitalized, and that's where policy needs to be addressed. So I'll open the house to Rajneesh. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm sorry, I'm Ria Bhandari.
Oh, Ria. So that is Rajnesh's daughter, Ria. Yes, Ria, go ahead.
Hello. I'm also a designer, actually, and I had a question regarding policy and everything you were talking about. So, you're talking about malleable hotels in 2040, and maybe right now, because people have been exposed to radical ideas or frugal innovation right now, people can be open to or accept ideas for sort of hotels that could look like that. But if for people who haven't been exposed to the speculative design process, how do you get them on board? How do you get organizations or government bodies or businessmen on board with your speculative design ideas or forecasting?
So you came up with the word speculative and forecasting, which I didn't use. So that is interesting. So you have been reading about that and it's part of your questioning. The element there is, how do we attract and raise the attention of leadership towards that? My answer is pretty simple. We need to do prototypes of something. In other words, the proof is in the pudding. Leadership will buy into a story if they have been put into critical conditions or if they say it works. So I'll bring back one word which we didn't use towards this 1 hour conversation, but which was implicit, which is the word convenience. If something is convenient, people are going to take it. And if we look at many entrepreneurship stories, good stories happen because it has been convenient at a scale. And if we look at good design, which is surviving, and Mahavir, you mentioned the word sustainable, good design is there if it is convenient with the time scale. And for me, one of the insights and learnings I'm looking into because of COVID is that for the last 50, 80 years, we have been too much looking at places, at physical, at specialities. And in the future, in the next few months, years, good entrepreneurship will need to look at what I call temporalities. What are the cycles? What are the habits? What are the routines? What are the rituals? And understanding of this will allow to come with interesting services. So to address your point about speculative design, it's if we get a good sense of temporalities and rituals and routines and habits that will come with interesting scenarios. And that is where we can push the boundaries.
Thank you. Next question is from Vikram. Vikram.
Yeah. Hi. Thanks for the very thought-provoking ideas today. And my question is that a mega event like COVID, how long do you think its effects will last onto humanity in the times to come? Do you think it'll continue to influence design in many years to come now?
I hope so. Mm-hmm. But I'm also skeptical, because if I go back into history in 1918, 1919, 1920, 1921, we had the Spanish flu. And the impact and the ability to change how it impacted stayed for 2, 3, 4 years. So what I'm coming with is that paradox: the human collective memory can be short.
Yeah.
And the experience is different. So we as human beings, we have the ability to forget because of survival. Collective groups have also the ability to forget because of survival. How do we cope with that? It's a complex question, both for policymakers and for designers. And so my point would be, I hope that people will remember long enough so that we can implement some sustainable solutions.
Good. Thank you. Thank you.
So, you know, that's very logical and point of view. And I think we should not forget, I mean, it'll be very bad for the society at large if we kind of forget the impact of something like a COVID. So, you know, with that, we're coming to the end of the session. Archana, you have some closing words to share? Archana, unmute yourself. Archana, unmute yourself.
Okay.
Yeah, now start. Yeah.
So I think the conversations are very intense, and I think the idea of complexity was key. That it's all processes seem to be very complex, right from governance to policy making to the individual to the organization. And I think it's a reflective process, and I think such conversations actually give more insights and reflection. So I think it's an opportunity where we are all in the COVID times. We'll call it the COVID times, and everybody is in the reflective mode. And if these reflections could be insights that could help us reinvent our businesses in some way or the other, small little things, So I really look at the temporary thing, which is very interesting, that, the businesses need to reinvent themselves more rapidly than we were actually thinking. So I think these are a couple of insights that have come into. So while I think everybody was quite stuck into the conversation, the words were also very powerful, very intense. I think each word had itself was it's like a encyclopedia in terms one has to really look forward to. So thank you so much. And I think Mahavir and Alok, you both went on very well to make it very engaging for all of us. Thank you for all the
I think we need to have Alok come to Jaipur and meet all of us in person. So next time, before you go for your bhat and chawal, you should come to Jaipur and try kadi chawal also. I think that's.
In fact, Mahavir, he was a part of the scientific committee of the colloquium, so he could make it. And so we had actually planned another one with the Lit Fest at the Design Open, but hopefully we'll see up kya hota hai. We don't know. But,
okay. So on that note, yeah, go
definitely,
ahead,
I'm looking forward to be live in real life in Jaipur, and jumping on your words and Archana's one. I would say that reflection in action is the DNA of entrepreneurship and the DNA of design.
Yeah,
if we don't do stuff, we get frustrated.
Yes.
And that would be that is one of my obsession is, yes, we can talk about stuff, but let's do some stuff.
Sure.
And one more thing that was very interesting, we had a 1-hour chat on at the Arch thing. We had 300 participants, and the beautiful thing that came up was, a lot of our decision making is reactive rather than proactive. So whether it's the 9/11 incident that happened and all the security measures that were taken has actually wasted so much of resources across the globe in terms of wastage of human time and potential and creativity, I feel. So I think when we're talking about wastage and we're talking about how we're building new infrastructures, is it out of a reactive thinking process, or is it proactive? So I think we have to be more proactive in terms of our approaches rather than being reactive.
Sure.
So I think that's an opportunity that we have, I think.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mahavir.
Thank you, Tai, and thank you, Tai Rajasthan, for having Alok, an international guest, beyond.
Thank you, Alok, and we'll be in touch. Thank you, everyone, for being patient enough to listen to our conversation.
Thanks everyone, and have a good evening there.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Great day.
Thank you, Archana.
Bye.